We are live. Welcome
Whoa.
to the Window to Our Mind, pod number 12, Diversity and Representation in the Media. Now, right now, I'm a bit sick. I think I caught a really bad cold, and
You
I
do
am
sound
testing.
this way, and that's why I wished you the best.
Thank you. And I am currently testing a new setup. Last time I used that setup, my computer died on me. I hope it won't happen again. So be advised. Be advised. How are you, Gray?
I'm doing good for the most part. Yeah, I need to reach out to a lot of people. I have, for some reason, decided not to respond to anybody in like a week, so I suck. But other than that, I'm doing good.
Typical Gray. Typical Gray. We can count on you, but not for replies.
No, no, that's a bridge too far. I'll be here, but I won't talk to you.
Bridge too far.
DC, how are you?
Fine. Fine. Things not been the best, but I mean, not the worst. But things been slowly been getting better. But yeah,
This is good news. This is what we want, and this is what we need. What about you, D Lord? How are you today?
I've been mostly good, yes. A little rocky last week. I did a little test stream earlier that
Hell yeah,
I
Frostpunk.
had,
Man.
I, I
It
had to
looked
get
good.
something off my chest, you know?
Seeing gaming through StreamYard, it was kind of cool. I thought it could be
It,
done.
it
but,
works on
good
low
job.
res games.
Oh my, Vincent
It's
is
not just
there.
you,
He's
Vin
like,
Vin. You're not special. It was also Tiamat and like 14 others. But yeah, good times.
typical Gray stuff. We can count on you
Oh.
to be there, but not to reply. Anyhow, um, I decided to cover this week because I'm the only one that suggests topic. Guys, I'm calling you out. Next week, maybe try to find something. Uh, anything? Um,
Can I say though, yeah, it's nothing, it's the problem is the holidays, okay? I'm not trying to get you the catch 22 of the not making you look bad, but it is the holidays, so sometimes I don't know. I know you Canadians are heathens, but we do value Christmas and things do pause here. As
oh,
I
Gray can
really?
testify.
It's a thing.
I
Wow,
don't value it.
interesting.
I don't value Christmas at all.
There
That
is this thing around Christmas, between Christmas and New Year's,
I
that
despise
stuff
Christmas.
slows down to a crawl.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. No, to be honest, like
No, it's okay. Some people
we
don't. You know,
we
it's
still celebrate it, even if we don't really believe in religion and stuff. We still like celebrate it. At least in Quebec, where I live. I
And some of us Americans are heathens too.
Yeah.
um, but yeah, so maybe we have an idea for next week. I don't know.
we'll
We
come
will
up with
talk
something.
about it. We will talk about it. We will cover something. So at first, the idea today was to cover the culture war. Unfortunately, no leftist has the balls to show up and talk about it with us.
Look,
And it's
Vincent.
not been a debate.
Vincent didn't want to step up, and plus, what
It's
you asked me, I had to.
it's a discussion, and this is how sad some cases are. We cannot even have a normal discussion, and it's kind of sad. So because of that, we pushed back diversity and representation to today, and I think it's very important to talk about it because there's a lot of narrative I'm against and others I'm for, and it's an interesting topic where you can always have fresh takes, fresh perspective on. So yeah, that's why I think it's relevant and interesting to talk about that. Um, so before we dive deep into the questions, I'm wondering what you guys are thinking about that topic today, starting with D Lord.
What was it? Sorry, like that a second. Too much space. What is the topic?
Yeah, what do you think of that
Sometimes I
topic?
have a, what's the topic you're thinking of? Sometimes it's sorry.
Diversity and representation
Okay.
In media.
in
In
media.
media. But,
Yeah.
sorry, it's one of those weird moments I have a potato brain for. Uh, yes. So with me, it all depends on how it is used. If it is used to expand a horizon, that's fine. If it's used as a cudgel, that's a separate issue.
What's cudgel? I don't know that word.
Like a club, a
A
beating
club.
implement.
Oh, okay. Okay, I see.
So, like, if people sometimes who do this, like BBC standards, they always enforce diversity. Hollywood has standards now too for something to be considered for the Academy Awards. It has to be diverse. Uh, so if Doctor Who, prior to all of this mess, they always have a quota or so because literally that is a quota is built into their filming. So a quarter of your cast has to be black, even if it's not representation. So the idea of I think it was Anne Boleyn that was black, and then Queen Charlotte. Just because pictures didn't exist of her back then, no paintings. Oh, she could have been black. Ugh. So you get the
Cleopatra?
idea. If it's used as a cudgel, it's a little harder to accept. So
Okay. And I'm curious, would you say it's a new thing or it was always around but people were less pissed at it, less picky or less aware? Would you
depends, really. I think it's always more. I think it's existed. I think it's gotten a lot worse now because if you go back to the '60s with like you know the Rat Pack era of music, Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, and Sammy Davis Jr. At one point in there, even though you had talented black artists like Louis Armstrong, stuff like that, Sammy Davis Jr. Fell in love with a white actress. They forced them to break up. He couldn't play in clubs because they wouldn't allow African American. People stuck up for him a little bit. This is history, it's not talked about. But there were certain stuff they said, well, talent, you're being promoted, but there's still culture. That's some of the stuff that changed after civil rights. But I'm sure Greg could testify. And then it's a little bit more overzealous now because in the US we have this thing called affirmative action. It was meant so minorities and lesser representatives could do stuff. Then what later has happened is the same logic is being used. So the top 10% can't get into the best universities. That university has to take an African American or something that can't get in. Does that make sense, Multi?
it does.
There's a
Uh,
policy because it is a policy of the 90s. Reverse affirmative action has been occurring.
okay. Well, so I guess we can actually dive deep into the fourth question now. Um, but before that, I will actually ask Gray. Do you think it's a new thing, diversity in representation in media, or it was always around but people just didn't notice?
No, I don't think it's a new thing, but it's not something that was necessarily like I don't know, built into media. For the longest time, like we did have kind of a code of what's acceptable. Like, even going back to like Lucille Ball and Ricky Ricardo, like that was controversial at the time to show like a mixed race couple, and then they certainly could not be shown in like the same bed, so they had to have that whole separation of bed thing.
That's
It's
weird.
weird. Like there has been representation over the years, but it hasn't always been. I don't know, the best.
Not to
A lot of the
interrupt you,
times
Gray,
it is.
but Multi, the first interracial kiss was done on Star Trek: The Original Series. Done, and she didn't even want to do it.
What? That sounds.
Yeah, like Lucy and Ricky could not kiss for the longest time. It's
Yeah.
it's strange. We had certain codes, so it's like the representation hasn't always been
Yeah.
there, and it definitely hasn't been a true depiction of diversity. But it got really better over the years. I think 90s might have been peak. Like, yeah, we had things like now I'm gonna date myself, I'm sure. hey, Miss Sparkles. But like we had things like the Burger King Kids Club, like the
Wow.
Ghostbusters. Like we had a lot of things that had like diverse members, but it wasn't like ham-fisted. They weren't just like stereotypes of like, okay,
I've
this
heard
person
worse.
is like the hood guy or whatever. This person speaks kind of like they do today, where it feels like it's very normal for a character to say like, as a member of X demographic, and then they start talking about this must be the representation for everyone from that group. It felt like it was more just we showed a diverse range of opinions and different people on the screen, and people seemed to get along. Like it was just yes, we're accepting that people are different. It doesn't feel like that's necessarily what's going on today. It feels like a different type of diversity. Like there is what appears to be kind of a quota system, like Tima was saying. That being said, like quotas aren't all bad. You guys are in Canada. There's some fun stuff going on up there with Canadian media and representation. It would suck if your media was overshadowed by just American media and you got nothing but that. They do have certain quotas where, like, if you're a radio station or TV station, you do have to have a certain amount of Canadian content. That is diversity in content. I don't mind something like that. Like that seems perfectly acceptable for a country to say, you have to at least have like X amount of our own country's material to broadcast it here. I don't know. That doesn't sound bad to me. That feels like it's a different type of diversity, but it feels like that would fit under the same thing. I'm not against every type of representation in media, and I'm definitely not against diversity. I'm just really against kind of a ham-fisted way and then making whatever representation you have the only possible opinion from that group, the only possible representation. That feels like it's a bridge too far to me. But yeah, I think we'll get into that coming up next.
Yeah, you make really interesting points that I like. And I agree with what you said. And this is funny because here in Canada, well, I will speak mainly for Quebec, but our media was always very inclusive, and it was always the same kind of stuff because we don't have that much money here for movies and TV shows and art in general. So, like, it's cheap stuff. So most of our like content out there is like drama and like I don't know how to really spell it in English, but it's basically téléroman. It's basically not necessarily a TV show or a movie you need to watch. You only listen to it, but they're still visual. But the visual aspect is kind of left off. It's really the dialogue. Like it's the kind of TV where the characters are telling what they think instead of showing it, if you know what I mean. So it's really like it's basically a novel on TV, basically.
I don't think we have those. Well, I mean, I guess if you count YouTube, we have that. But that's interesting. I don't think
Would
we
you
have
call
those
that
here.
similar to like telenovas for?
Yeah, but a lot
maybe
of that, like, you got to see like their face, like how scorned the lover is, or whatever. I don't know. Like a lot of those still have visuals, but
that
I don't know.
our TV does have visual, but it's not as important as what the characters are seeing and thinking and yeah, like there's still something you can watch, but it's like the
I
kind of
gotta.
TV people can like
I kind of
play.
figured it was a little bit more public accessy.
Yeah, I think
Oh, like
I think Miss Sparkle kind of it at the right place. It's like narrative storytelling type of TV shows. Yeah, it's like it, it's like it's not necessarily radio play because radio play really don't have anything you can look at. Well, the programming does have something to look at, but that thing is not that important, if I can call it that way. So most of our media in movies and TV shows, they are either drama or stuff you can just listen and not even watch what's going on and understand what's going on. Um, and most of it was always aimed at women. There's not that many action flick. It's more like personal drama and that kind of stuff, or romantic stuff, or comedy romantic, that kind of stuff. Like we don't have that many action driven stuff or things that will appeal more to a more male audience. Um, but it was still very like progressive. It's just that the
Huh.
target audience was mainly women. Like
soapy.
maybe.
Is it like soaps,
Huh.
but like in the U.S.?
Well, like they've got soaps up there too. I don't think he's talking about soap opera type of deal. Like I think more like old radio plays, like Vincent sang. Like we
Yeah,
used to have stuff like that,
I
but
just don't know the
I don't
exact
know.
name in English. Like in French, it's
Hmm.
téléroman. I will actually type it.
See, I was gonna joke. I thought most radio Canadian programming was like the Tim and Eric Awesome Show.
No, it's just Rush and the Tragically Hip. But other than that,
Or
nothing.
no, or
Uh,
Trailer
no,
Park Boys,
it's
just like what's really Canada's really like. I love how
yeah.
that reference is not doesn't go over.
Oh, okay. So
Uh,
I've seen a definition. So right now it says TV novel or annual drama series.
Hmm.
I think that's
I mean,
the
like we've got
proper.
like a lot of like kind of drama, like procedural things. Like I don't know if you necessarily have to watch, like say Law and Order. You could probably just listen to it. Okay, now they've reached the suspect. Now they're talking. Like you'd probably get it without visuals, but
I
huh?
I I
Still, I think yours is more.
I don't think Law fits that because Law still has like some things where they show stuff on screen that actually matter.
Yeah.
Uh, I haven't seen the entire thing. I've only seen a few episodes here and there, but
Mhm.
I don't think it fits.
Then you've probably seen the thing. It's procedural. It's one is pretty much like the next
So
one.
so
Very episodic.
basically, it's very procedural where we are here in Quebec. So that's one thing that's very procedural, and that's also why I'm not really into like media from where I live because it just I'm not the target audience. Even the movies.
I would be hard pressed to come up with like a Canadian action movie if I had to. I can think of quite a few comedies, a couple of horror flicks, but
We don't have
yeah, I got to
horror
be
here.
honest. I'm
It's very very rare. I don't remember the last horror movie made in Quebec. Maybe in Canada, but in Quebec,
Yeah, I was gonna say I
I
don't know that it was
I
Quebec, but I know either Toronto or Vancouver. There's been a few.
and yeah, that's why right now. Well, not right now, but I did start working on a translation of a TV shows I adore. That's hands down my favorite TV show that is made in Quebec, and that's weird because that's the only piece of media made here that I praise and recommend. That's why I work on a translation because it's very hard to find the proper version because that same TV show had a English Canadian version of it, but it's not as good, and that's why I work on a translation um, for you guys, for Cole as well. And Cole was curious about it, but now it's kind of on ice because my computer is not good enough. And yeah,
I've been there. I feel your pain.
so I basically translated 4 entire episodes, and I cannot wait to finish all 30 episodes. That show is over, and I will basically uh, upload it, but like unlist it so some specific people can see it, and maybe we will eventually, once I'm done with the translation and all, cover that on the Red Blue podcast eventually as one of the TV show slots. But again, that will most likely take a lot of time because I'm only 4 episodes in, and it's like 30 episode, but it's worth watching. And it's a drama, but like it's basically a cop drama, but more centered around the drama than the cop job itself. And the cop job is like well depicted and very realistic to what cops are really doing and what they're really dealing with, and it's very accurate to the cop basically. And that's what is kind of good because the characterization in that show is amazing. The story is amazing, but it's one of the rare product that is really worth watching from where I live. Um, anyhow, we went on a small tangent there. I guess we can ask the first question to Gray. What is diversity and representation in media?
Well, I think I kind of answered it with the previous question, but yeah. So it would be, showing various types of people. You know, I don't think it just equates to like skin color or origin, but showing a wide cornucopia that is society and representing a good portion of them on screen. I think that's generally what's kind of accepted as diversity and representation in media. And I guess the thought is, you would more easily identify with somebody who looks like you on screen. And then we'll kind of get into other things, but that's kind of how I understand it as it's currently being used.
Yeah, fair point. Good point. D Lord, you are next. What is diversity and representation in the media?
I think it is the representation of a culture or a subject through a lens. It can be both used in positive and negative lights, as such as a current famous film working its way through, which is probably too spicy for you. But it is a then it's at the worst it is played for by tropes and other items. But it is usually how culture is representative of the times or the how you're depicting it.
Okay. So I will ask if DC is back because he's next on the
Yeah, I'm
line.
back.
Okay,
Yeah, I'm
so
back.
what is diversity and representation in media?
Diversity is basically like a specific group of people who, or like whether it's gender, race, etc. Um, and you see how different it is. Like it's not like the typical, like you know, as how it's represented in media. It's used for like the rights and just to acknowledge. Sometimes it goes well. Sometimes they go way too far. But yeah.
Okay, well, that's a fair point. So yeah, everyone kind of hit the nail at the right place. Diversity and representation in media is basically LGBTQ plus representation on TV shows, movies, novels. What else? Any media, basically.
There is
It's
a I want to say there is that movie. Hmm. And as I said, you don't want to get too the I there's a trailer I can recommend if DC or them wants to watch it. It's kind of it's kind of touching the wrong nails of the head of things. Uh, there, yeah, see, Miss Sparkles, you don't know about this one either. Uh, the idea, it's the movie is called the what is it called? Society of the Magical Negro.
Okay.
This film plays literally on the trope, and the trailer is pretty horrifying. The trailer is meant to a black man needs to make white people feel better because when white men get scared, they go after black people. That's the subject of the film.
Wow.
And
Very
so a
American.
character plays a person who's recently recruited. His job is to fix this. And yes, it is going down as well as you think it's going to go down on both sides. Not even African American or black population like it. So, when you talk about diversity, you got to think some.
This
See, Miss
is
Sparkle knows about that movie. It's it was trending on Twitter and sometimes confessions.
this is very American to make some kind of product like that. Like,
Do you know what's funny, by the way? I was just watching a Lotus Eaters thing. They had this Nigerian black woman on. She saw when they were talking about the film. Sargon had to explain to her that in America that they see stuff through race, and I wish I could agree with him. Disagree. But that's the nature of our media right now. They go,
Yeah.
She asked Sargon the question, do most Americans actually see all blacks as whatever and victimized? And that's not the case over in the UK because they do have progress. It's a really interesting thing while you're on this. It goes along with this subject, right? How they depict stuff over there is very different than how we depict our television.
Yeah.
And they don't always see things through the lens of race, or it's hard. That's why it's kind of hard for stuff, was harder for stuff to take hold over there. Not to divert, but you get the idea.
And yeah, I get it, and it's fascinating. Like here in Quebec, we don't have that lens. We just don't. Like not every TV show or
Yet.
movie have Asian people in it, because we don't have that many Asian actor here. Like yeah, that may sound weird, but no Asian come to my mind from where I live. None. And it's not because like they're not just not driven to act here. I think that's the biggest explanation. Um, but yeah, like they could be cool to being more present there, but it's not the focus because I would know like some Asian that would go like in acting. Like if you really look at the school of acting, it's mainly white people that go there, at least in Quebec. And yeah, um, that's that may sound weird, but I think the other thing is a lot of people come here in Quebec just for education and then they leave. that's the other factor there. Um, so they get educated, or they get a easy job, and then they just leave.
Do
That's
you
another
is
factor.
your economy service based, or do you still have a lot of industry like factory, coal mining,
We
forestry?
It depends.
Because like Alberta's totally more like like ranch country and stuff, but it's really regional from what I
Yeah,
picked up living up there.
like we have a few factories here and there. Uh, I know one industry that has a lot of same people, like in security. Like most security guards in Quebec are black people. Like I'm the minority in every workplace I'm in. For like the last 7 years, I'm always a minority.
Hmm.
That may sound weird, but like I think most African or Asian are just driven to go in security.
No,
Um,
that's why I asked, because like if it's rural, you would think you have more natural, like forestry or coal mining or stuff like that. That's going to breed a different kind of culture than a service that has mostly a lot of goods or services, if that makes sense.
yeah, well, um, mines are rare in Quebec. Like they are in up north, or like in really isolated areas like countryside and that kind of stuff. Um, but it's rare. I'd say there's a lot of service base, if we can call it that way, like
Yeah, so it's
shops or like hotel and that kind of stuff.
yeah.
Uh,
So it's not like forestry and other matters, because that's kind of what happened in the U.S. Once a lot of service like does that's where you see a lot of this issue pop up more. It's in these areas more than your working class areas, because to be honest, right, multi first world problems, not that. The working man generally doesn't care about his or her surroundings. It's usually the whole thing of, that's why when you go towards other parts of the world, they're like, really, you don't have that luxury. So yes, welcome, Patrick. Yes, we should.
yeah,
But that doesn't make sense, multi. That's why I ask. Like when
yeah,
you're in an area, right, that has industrialization or that's like manufacturing, or you have that. And of course, it's only going to be representative by what you can hire. And that's
yeah,
going to influence your media eventually. Then you
yeah,
do have, like, if Hollywood, was American, they know it. That's why it inspired Bollywood. That's what inspired Korean films, if that
yeah,
makes sense.
yeah. It does.
It's the
So,
cultural aspect. It's but at the same way they destroyed it.
and there's another group of people outside of those that just come here to to like study and stuff. Like they're like most Asian I did see was at McGill University when I was working there. They that goes back to what I said. They come here to study and then they leave. And the same goes like we got a lot of people from Europe, like French people. So these are like very common people from here. So that's also why our media is mainly driven by white people. But yeah, um, so I guess we spent enough time for question number one, and we will go to question number two. Um, Yeah, I will also say that most media here where I am is female led, because most actors, at least the known ones, are actresses actually. That's the other thing. Like we got maybe three or four big names that are guys, but we have like 10, 12 big names that are women's. And maybe that's also explaining why most of our media is aimed at women, because more women are making it and more women maybe consume it. Um, but yeah. Um, Question number two: what is good and what is bad representation? Starting with Gray.
Yeah. So I think, good diversity and inclusion in and representation in media. Uh, I think it would be not stereotypes, not ham-fisted. It's just kind of like a dissection of kind of everyday just on display. People can definitely see a wide variety of different people with different opinions, different looks, different whatever. I think kind of an accurate snapshot instead of like what often happens is kind of extreme caricatures and then representations of like an entire people based off of like one character. I don't know. I think that then gets to be a really negative representation, and then it feels like it's forced as opposed to just kind of a natural slice of life. I don't think that something that's fantasy necessarily has to be based in reality, but it gets kind of weird when you start doing like revisionist history type of things. I don't know. I think if you're going historical, it should be somewhat of an accurate depiction. And then fantasy, I think it can really be anything. But to me, negative depictions become when you focus on you can only represent with people that look like you. You can only identify with that. That seems to be a really negative thing. Some of my favorite characters that I've ever identified with were strong female characters. I think it would be wrong to think that I can only identify with white males of a certain age range or something like that. Oftentimes you can, through seeing different characters, you can develop more empathy. You can learn to kind of understand where they're coming from. But I can also identify with them. It's not that you have to have a perfect one-to-one representation of every look that's out there or, every demographic. I don't know. I think when you start pushing it as you can only be represented by a certain identity, that seems to be a bit too far for me. And then that tends to get to the stereotypes. So that to me would be the negative one. But the widespread empathy and understanding is where representation and diversity really excels.
I agree 100%. And I will say this: good representation is when you're allowed to treat ways based on like different experience. So what I mean by there is, um, you don't need everyone to be a stereotype. Everyone is their own character. Or what is good representation is diversity of representation. What I mean by there is you can have like that religious black guy or that religious white guy or that religious Asian, or you can have that person that doesn't believe in religion that has any color. So if you always depict uh, black people as religious, then you're kind of racist because you think that every black people are religious when it's not true. Yes, a lot of them are, but you cannot place that stamp on every single one of them. And this is bad representation when you have that stamp and you're like, okay, that person must check all of these boxes to be a character in this or that. Um, Characters must be more than just a list of checkbox, because otherwise they don't really represent that aspect of society. They only represent what you think should be, and this is bad representation. And the biggest um, example of bad representation was men representation in Cloak and Dagger TV show. Season 2 went all in at hating every single man. Every single man, uh, despite of color, like every single man in that show was a piece of shit. Um, and it's like, okay, is it a satire or they really believe what they are doing? And they actually really believed it because they were that wasn't a comedy, that was a drama. So when everyone is a piece of shit, like, oh, okay, whatever. Uh, like even like the one guy that should have been a good guy was actually the main villain. You're like, okay, whatever. Um, so this was bad representation because you only showcase that man can be bad, and you don't have that counterbalance. You don't have that good man or that good person. They can all be men, and the same goes for example in that same show. Uh, there was a villain sidekick that did as much bad things as the main villain, but because she was a woman, she got a pass on it. So now the message you're sending is woman cannot do harm. I know woman that did harm. So that's bad representation because you only check some square you want to check. Um, so yeah, Rosales brought a very interesting point. Um, so I focused a lot on bad representation, but what I do think is good representation is when it's balanced. Good aspect, you show bad aspect. What is good representation is well made and realistic. Like you got that bad guy, but you also got that good guy. Um, you try to depict how people are in real life, but you place them on that sci-fi, fantasy, or drama setting. You try to calc what's really going on. Like self-insert sometimes can be decent if it's made by like people that inspire themselves from their surrounding and not necessarily themselves, if you guys know what I mean, because there's some self-insert you're like, oh, it's clearly the writer, I don't know anybody like that. But then there's also the self-insert where the person looked at someone he knew or she knew, and that same person is someone you can relate to. um am I clear on that, or I'm too messy and I go everywhere? I guess I'm too messy. The silence tells everything.
No, that makes sense. I was just a couple steps away from my mic. Wasn't too messy. I get you.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so yeah, good representation is something that like is important. Um, so yeah, I will ask the same question to D Lord. What would be good and bad representation in media?
I think good representation is if you're trying to depict the subject accurately and you're not trying to take it out of totally bad context, such as Napoleon, or trying to make Anne Boleyn black, or change like Hannibal Barker of Carthaginian fame is going to be played by Denzel Washington. So the idea is, I think it can be done in a healthy aspect, but if you're doing it just for anything beyond satire or totally something, it oversteps the bounds. Then you think, well, you think I'd hate something like Hamilton. Hamilton is satire, so that it's acceptable, even though sometimes I wouldn't agree with the messaging in it. But it is allowed. So that's what I thought. You can move on.
Okay. Um, so I will ask DC. Question number two, DC. What is good and bad representation?
Um, Good representation is when you are balancing out, like you said. Like, yeah, there's a lot of like bad, like let's just say there's a show where there's a lot of like male bad guys, but then there's also some female villains as well, and it's like it balances out. You have some villains who are white, you have villains who are black, villains who are straight, villains who are gay, villains who are non-binary, villains who have a gender. There's always like a balance. That's like the an example I can give. Like it's like when everything is balanced is a good example, and it also showcases a message as well. Like, but where it goes too far is when it no longer becomes balanced and
Hello,
just
gentlemen.
oh
I
hi
dare.
yeah and yeah I'll just quickly finish, and it's like when a bad representation is when like just it's just clearly shown that they're just having some villains like be a specific group just because they don't care and they don't want to balance out. It's kind of like that. That's a bad example. Yeah, and the perfect like type of films are like shows like Supergirl. Let's see, pretty much any film that's woke, pretty much are fall into the bad representation perfectly.
Okay, well, that's very interesting. I really like your take. So welcome, Miss Sparkle. I'm glad to see you.
Oh, yeah.
So I will ask you the first two questions before we keep going with the third one. Question number one: what is diversity and representation in media?
What is it?
Yeah,
Uh,
what is it? Yeah.
it's characters that represent people. I don't know, like for nowadays, it's, um, people of color, fat people, and stuff like that in cinema. I mean, like that. I don't know.
Well,
Is that what you mean? Like
yeah,
they're changing
yeah,
like characters and different colored people?
yeah.
Yeah.
Or
A
like
female Professor X though, someone could great. I think that'd be horrible. A female Professor X would be horrible. I think he's
Okay,
perfect the
why
there's
way he is.
something not to sidetrack. Okay,
why do you think it's
it
we let her
wouldn't be
explain. I
good,
want to
but I
hear
will
her
say
reason.
okay. If
No,
you
I
take
won't.
the case of Cassandra Nova,
What is
Cassandra
that?
Nova, I might butcher her origin. She was the twin of Xavier that either died at birth or
Oh, I didn't know
whichever.
about that.
She's been in the comics. They kind of said she is independent,
Oh,
but you wouldn't
didn't know
exact
anything.
it. You wouldn't. It would be very weird. Be a very weird story. I wouldn't think anyone would do that. But the idea of Storm leading the X-Men is not revolutionary either.
No.
It's been done before.
Well, I like Professor X a lot. Like, I prefer him to stay the way he is. So
Well, okay, that's
he
and
was like one of my favorite
they
characters.
would
So
never change it. If anything would happen, it's like there's always a similar figure that takes over. Like it's always the same. But I don't think it would ever be done because even in the alternate universes, like in Age of Apocalypse, it's Magneto who takes over Charles's place.
Mm.
Or in the future, it's usually like Storm or something.
I think
That
it's
has always
Jean
been
Grey
the
too, of
case.
course.
So that has always been the case.
Mm.
Yeah, you'll ever see if
Yeah.
we.
I just don't understand why they got to mess with something that's already good. So
Yeah, so that's why you don't like the idea of having a female Xavier.
no, I just
Don't
like
do
the way
it.
he is. I think he's cool the way he is. And I just don't think a woman could play him. He's
That's
Look,
the way
good.
you
he
could
is.
theoretically spin it as an alternate universe with like Cassandra Nova, but that would never
There's
happen.
just some stronger and more, just the way he is. I don't want him to be changed to a woman. I respect him more as the
And
way he
that's
is.
not what the leak is saying or anything like that. One of the previous leaks did say that they were considering like Giancarlo Esposito, though, the dude from Breaking Bad and the Mandalorian.
For what league?
So it's kind of gone both ways, but the last I heard
Are you
was
talking for Deadpool 3?
no, it was just for this reboot of the X-Men, which is going to be female led. So
So
that
just
doesn't
got-
necessarily mean that they're changing the genders of everybody. It just means female led. So that doesn't mean no males whatsoever. But it's just all rumors at this point. But
Well,
it
that
is
would be
another way of showing
file-
representation.
Okay,
Yeah.
file that right up there with the idea that goes along with the same subject we're talking about now is they jokingly talked about rebooting the X-Men with a Black Magneto. And
Oh.
that entirely takes
Oh.
I
away
think they've
from
completely
the-
changed it. Now they're saying no Magneto in this first phase. It would be Mr. Sinister,
So,
which could be cool.
okay, who here
I
knows
don't
of
really like Mr.
Magneto's?
Sinister.
Who here knows of Magneto's origin?
Was he
He's
I
Jewish?
do.
he's a Jewish
Something?
Holocaust and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
That's what I was
the
gonna say. They're gonna
idea
have to change the whole story.
Well, he
you would
represents
literally
Holocaust
change
survivors.
a lot.
Yeah.
There's
They'd have
the
to change the whole
idea
backstory.
of it that he survived that or he was a kid. But there's a lot of these rumors that come around. Like, they may be able to mess with it, but I'll be honest, a lot of you're seeing with because Hollywood money is drying up and certain stuff is like when David Zaslav took over WB, they canned a lot of movies. Like the Batwoman movie was or
Bad
Batgirl
deal.
movie was literally canned because they didn't think it, they thought it was going to bomb. They still had to release The Flash. There was too much money involved. Years down. Apparently, they were still moving forward, but they revised the project of Aquaman 2. So, a lot of these things you're seeing with diversity, they're not. So, when there's a backlash to it amongst the fandoms, and studios are not apparently going to. Budgets are shrinking, so they don't allow for bombs. So you're probably not going to see a lot of experimentation. Now, if you're going to see anything, as you might see certain people pushed forward, it probably won't be as bad as the X-Men with Jennifer Lawrence as Mystique. Because she actually, the thing is, she had the role that she had to be a leading person. That's why they made Mystique more of a girl boss. Which, because Jennifer Lawrence was
So,
I mean, Mystique has led the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants in the comics, so it kind of makes sense. But yeah,
it's a
okay.
very interesting thing on how they would go with it to reboot the X-Men. But it's going to be really weird because I just don't foresee it. Because considering Jonathan Majors just got convicted of harassment, third-degree harassment, and
So we don't want to represent harassers in the MCU
assault.
now?
He got Kane's entirely taken out of the MCU at this point. They still might move forward with Secret Wars. That means they're going to have to cast the alternative, and that's going to be Doctor Doom. Which, that means they're doing 2015 Secret Wars. Which,
yeah, and I think I'm not excited. Like
you don't.
we
Okay,
don't know what's gonna
you're roboting.
like.
Welcome, Master of None. Dark Master. Sorry,
Or
you're roboting.
Robo.
I'm gonna try and leave and
See, I will say this. There is the aspect of like 2015 Secret Wars There's stuff you could do because it's been really, really weird, right? Like, you can say that the X-Men don't have
All right, am
representation. Yes.
You're still
do I
rubble.
sound better?
There is the
Now
argument
it's
that,
better. Now it's
sorry,
better.
there
Oh,
is the
all right,
aspect
all
of
right.
the X-Men. They are representative of civil rights. They are representative of stuff in comics.
Yep.
So they're their own. But
Yeah, except I don't think the X-Men will work well in the MCU. They just won't. Especially because some of their storylines, yeah, they won't work. But yeah, it's like that's why I often say that's why I feel like for the Secret Wars, whether anyone will admit it or not, the X-Men just don't work well with the X-Men really won't be able to work well with MCU. So that's why I say they could have other crossover characters that Marvel has done with. Like I said, Capcom could be one. You can have Street Fighter and all those other characters
no,
show up. And yeah,
no,
or
DC. Let me ask you this:
yeah,
2015. Let's assume it is the 2015 Secret Wars. No one has an issue with the 2015 Secret Wars. That's, I think, when the last one. That was one of the few reboot crises that you could have them represent an Earth and then be brought in, because it's very weird with the MCU as it stands. Yes, to introduce mutants. They kind of touched upon it with Multiverse of Madness, said it's far another. Because let's say that's Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver. But that's why I ask you, DC, because the idea, if it's multiverse, they could make it work. And what's going to happen, though, is you already see it with Deadpool 3. They're using a lot of the Fox assets. They could incorporate it that way. But that could just be a representation of an alternate Earth.
I mean,
Yeah.
I mean,
So yeah, you finish on that idea, DC, and then
all
we
right,
will move away from the tangent.
all right. So, I mean, not sure how I like that idea because I mean, the way how they did No Way Home, I think, kind of gives me the feeling that they're just gonna use other Marvel contents like the Fox property just because fan service and plus, it's to get the other characters around. Where I don't think they're actually thinking a more logical way and thinking, yeah, this won't work. We can try to find a different way, like. Like a perfect example was when before No Way Home came out. I often made a thing where like if they say this was like Spider-Man meets Family Guy, it can actually work because because on Family Guy because not only is with the cartoon and live action, but it actually has a ability of working, you know, and I can kind of see it working. With this, it's because they're taking too many live action franchises and like try to merge them into the MCU's timeline, but the reality is it won't work no matter what. That's why I always thought you're gonna have to make your own take on the character, whether it'll be easier, even though it probably won't be easy and it'll just be easier to just take others. Um, it just shows how it just shows you more like you just want more other characters just to bring them in, just to bring to your MCU, just so then you can see, oh, we can have X-Men, the Avengers team up against, I don't know, Galactus, or you can have Spider-Man interacting with Mr. Fantastic, where in reality they're just doing it for fan service. Whereas, let's just say, I'm going to use my Marvel's DC show as an example. You know, yeah, there's other characters from other franchises, but I mean, the way it's merged is a little different. Plus, those characters are almost their own take on the characters. They're not like, oh, like here's Peter Griffin from Family Guy, or here's Ray Grimes from The Walking Dead, or here's Rio from Street Fighter. Oh, here's Scorpion from Mortal Kombat. They're like their own take on the characters. that's like the perfect like representation of having a crossover characters come. But I don't know, maybe that's just me.
Okay, so that tangent was quite interesting because D-Lord and DC do know the comics, I think.
Yep.
But it was all about representation and diversity. Female X-Men, diverse.
yeah. I hope they do it right, otherwise that's just another of these forgettable and bad example. Number three, why would Hollywood or other studio would push for diversity and representation?
I'm gonna start.
Yeah,
I think they just do it because they have nothing better else to do. Like I constantly look on these woke channels and some channel. I usually sometimes like to visit channels that just talk about movies that they don't like, and I know they're just doing it because they have nothing else to do. Same thing with Hollywood and other studios. Like I know they would just sometimes push a film that's female centric, but it has all male villains just because to push. And really, they don't really want to do like a message and all that. Like they just chose to just put it out there because they don't care. I just think they just do it because they don't care. They don't care about the message. They don't care about anything else other than, oh, we have women in our movies. Come watch our movie. It's like, yeah, it doesn't work like that. And yeah, it like takes me off the movie. I think they just do it because they don't care. Maybe that's just me.
okay, I like your approach. So when it comes to me, I'd say maybe they want to tap into other demo, other audience, but again, you cannot force an audience to accept your product. That's the thing that the Marvels has proven everyone that as much as you want to be diverse, not necessarily every woman want to see superhero stuff. Again, they want to tap untapped market, but I think maybe there's something wrong with the approach. I will let Dre talk about it now.
Yeah, I think both of those are kind of bad examples. You're right. The approach is definitely wrong, but I guess they had to take out like nearly a third of that movie from the director and made like 3 different cuts to get what we actually ended up seeing. And then also they were on strike, so it's not like there's the traditional amount of like advertising that could be done. They were reduced to having like cat adoptions online. So I don't know if that's necessarily like the best like representation of like women don't want to see this, but I think the writing is kind of on the walls there. But as for the question, like, why would Hollywood do this? You're seen as the good guy for doing this. Nobody's going to say, like, why would you, like, put diversity into this? Like, instead, you get called out for not putting diversity into something. As Tiamat pointed out, certain broadcasts and certain companies have, like, certain quotas that seems a little strange. I don't know. And then others have kind of an ideological push that, you can't put certain people in bad light. So it ends up creating other stereotypes or things that are kind of against stereotype and just read as insincere to a lot of people. But I think the main reason of why somebody would do this is because you looked at as the good guy for doing this, and it is seen as something virtuous that you're on the right side of history by changing history to. I'm trying to remember exactly how they put it, but I think it was we need to reimagine history in the best possible light. I don't know. That sounds a little bit dangerous to me, but
Ray,
you're
you're
seen as a good
thinking
guy
a
for doing
term
that.
of the problem is that you're revising history based on modern standards.
Not modern standards, modern ideals.
Well,
It's not even like to our standard.
well, modern ideals is like that's why like they didn't think anything wrong because we're not even to the part of don't get me wrong. I think Denzel Washington could play a good Hannibal Barker, but that just doesn't fit the narrative. That's what they're going with. And you would have thought the crap when Netflix got hit with Black Cleopatra I guess there's not Carthaginian descendants to yell at them. And yes, as Gallifreyan Avenger said, that's the standards I brought up. So, yeah.
Yeah, very interesting approach. So I guess you can go ahead with your answer now that you kind of started talking about it. So what would be your response, D-Lord, to the third question?
How to handle it? Is that the third?
Why would Hollywood or other studio would push for diversity in representation?
I think they want to change the representation of the time. They want to, or they just want to promote what they think is the standard they want to project. I mean,
Okay.
it's kind of like recently you have Director X talking about Robin Hood. That show has been totally destroyed from all sides. But this is a guy, he's like a champagne socialist raised around people who are, or just in the culture of people who have probably let him sniff his own farts, kind of thing. And he doesn't like the backlash that, oh, he depicts black people in a bad light. So, like, sometimes people's artistic visions don't mesh with what they actually see. And there is this whole thing of why you're seeing certain works being done, but you're not seeing historical pictures being done. Which it's weird. It's only bad when it's done in an activist angle, not being done from that. So, it's a weird way of answering the question, but that's how I see it.
Well, this is an answer nonetheless. Last question. What are the benefits and downside of good and bad representation? Starting with Gray.
I started talking and I was still muted. Yeah, I think the upsides are definitely it could cause more empathy. It could help you relate to some character that you might not have previously related to, which would again inspire more empathy, more understanding. But the downside to it is it can create really horrible stereotypes, and it can also create biases as well. Again, if you're not allowed to show like a certain race or a certain demographic in a negative light, you can only show them in a positive light. Well, if you're going to have negative characters, then all of those negative characteristics are going to fall on another character. That can definitely create resentment. More of a slice of life. So you show the actual diversity that exists, including diversity of opinion, diversity in every type of area, not just like skin color. Yeah, that could be awesome. It can show us a lot more understanding. It can definitely, help to cultivate empathy. But yeah, I think when it's done heavy-handedly and very biased, it can definitely create more resentment and more hostility. And it doesn't come off authentic, and it really kind of brings down the quality of the product in most cases.
Yeah, I feel you 100%. Now, that is similar to what I got to say about it. So, the benefit, the biggest one, would be giving hope to some people because now they have that example like, oh, he looks like me and he can do that, so this means I can also do it. That's very positive. But again, the downside is if, just like what you said, only white people are depicted that way, then only white people are perceived as bad, and then the kid that is white maybe will look at it and it will be like, I'm doomed, or I will turn like that because that every representation of that is like that on TV or movies. So I'd say like as much as it can uplift people, it can really put down others. And I think the right balance would make it even. If you have good example of good representation of a demographic, then that same demographic will feel uplifted. But if you only show, for example, okay, you only say, for example, white people can only be good guys, then what happens if a white guy end up being bad? You only have the notion in your mind that white people are always good, so you won't really necessarily believe that that white guy is bad. So it's 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 like inside psychology a lot. Like if you're surrounded by people that don't believe in you, then it will be very hard for you to believe in yourself. That's why you need to be surrounded of the proper people, the proper models. But that's my answer. I don't know if I was clear enough or if I sound crazy. Am I crazy?
You were clear for me.
Clearly crazy.
So I will ask DC, what's your answer?
All right. So some of the benefits of good representations are, you could at least make diverse, make people be a little less like strict, and people can at least support others, and less racism, less discrimination, that nonsense. However, the bad and a major downside is when it goes too far, it just drives people away from entertainment. Like, I think now more people are driving away from the MCU because they realize that because of this MCU thing that's been going on for a few years, it's been driving people away. I think people have been starting to watch the DCU a little bit more, whereas like that's like the bad representation. That's the downside, and that's what happens when you push it too much. Where some benefits could have been if they pushed it, but not to a point where it became to drive people away. But yeah.
Yeah, fair answer. Do you want to add more before we pass the mic to D-Lord?
No. D-Lord can speak.
Okay, D-Lord, what do you think of all of that? Question number 4. Do you need me to repeat it or you know it?
Yes. Sorry, memory of goldfish today.
Okay, so number 4, what are the benefits and downsides of good and bad representation?
It can negatively affect both sides. Like, you can hurt what you want to promote, and you can also, if it's done right, it can be done as a helpful benefit. Take something as the Woman King as a prime example. Now, as controversial as it was, you could have gone with the actual history. The guy was John. There's irony. It was John Boyega who didn't like the representation of black people in when he was in doing media, but he played a king that believed in slavery. Then the Europeans, they twisted it, which kind of irritated both sides. But if you did it as the Europeans, actually in history, did try to end the slave trade there, but they went the other way. I think in certain aspects it can be good if you tried to convey the story properly. But if it is done ham-fisted, it does more harm than good, because it's very hard to remake certain stuff now because of the perversion of the stuff going on. Like, I'm sure we've all heard the story of the reboots of Buffy over the years. They wanted to reboot Buffy years ago. They're like, oh, we're going to make a Black Slayer. Okay. And that kind of got like, oh, but we know they go, we're going to reboot it, but we're going to make Buffy black. It's like, just make another series, but
Like a spin-off, I don't know.
like, oh, but that's why no one's tried like the reboot of like Xena or anything like that. you know, that's kind of like the way you look at, like, people didn't like Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman, but that's female empowerment. Xena was female empowerment. But modern people, when they want to remake stuff, it doesn't look like female empowerment.
Yeah.
So you can properly do stuff, but you can do it without deconstructing like the men of the household and et cetera, that has gone on all these years. And it is very much the case of, that's how I can say it can literally be done as good and bad. You can have strong female leads, but just, or whatever, don't do it the way it's done, that it deconstructs or makes the modern activism take the main center stage.
Yeah.
Complicated and long answer, but yes.
I like it. And I will add one more to my list. I think it also normalized the existence of certain group of people. And this is the biggest benefits from that. Like maybe some people won't be lonely anymore because they're like, oh, they do exist. They're still around. So yeah. Um, so that's what I wanted to add. Um, Normalization of group of people is fine when they are a positive example, but of course we said it, if it's only one side, if it's only all bad and you're not trying to satire, but it's you're trying to get your message through the lines, it's when it's kind of bad. um but again, um everything has good and bad in it. um so yeah, that was diversity and representation. um I liked that topic a lot. And what do you have going on, D-Lord, on your end? You said you started streaming or something.
Oh yeah, I did. The first of many.
Oh.
Probably, yes. I just did decide to do random. I mean,
Oh.
I'll see how it goes.
Okay.
Chasing my great white whales. I didn't know who stopped in earlier, and I was hoping it was the person that it was intended for. But
Okay.
it's I got my own, and eventually Gray is gonna have that special edited down. That's what I was hoping he was doing for 10 days. But I have my own. It's if some feel free to subscribe and just stop by. It was random topic addressing something and a couple individuals I dealt with recently. But it's
This
not
sounds
always gonna
fun.
be, I know, spontaneous.
This sounds fun. I like spontaneous stuff. DC, what do you have going on, or what are your future projects?
Mm, not much. Not much. Other than I've been getting some ideas for promotional, promotional stuff for my Marvel's DC show. But yeah, featuring other characters. But yeah, that's about it. The only like future project I have incoming. But yeah.
That's nice. I'm looking forward for it. What about you, Gray? I heard you have a new streaming channel, or I don't know what. What?
Yeah, basically like streaming gaming channel. Just a second channel. Very similar name, but yeah. I just figured, I'm not doing a lot with this particular channel, and I kind of needed to. The people who came for the videos aren't necessarily coming for the stream, so I thought I'd just.
You're doing it smarter. Let me just say, it's like why I heard the claim of. Okay, there's this claim that people don't understand, as I heard on a certain friendly podcast of gaggle of seagulls. They're like, why would Eric, he puts Forcanic's sake on another channel? Well, people who subscribe to you for one thing people do this all the time. Like me and Gray discussed, move the gaming to a second channel because it doesn't move with the demographics of the channel that's there. Does that
Yeah,
make sense?
yeah, it does.
Because people who watch you for one thing, very rare can you have a brand that's 1 and 2.
Yeah,
Arch is able to pull it off on the Arch cast because it blends in. Some
yeah,
people, if they cover lore, it's going to be different than someone who spontaneously does gaming.
yeah,
So that's one of the mini projects. And then Gray and Patrick will return and they'll do stuff as well. That's looking forward to that.
Well, this is some good projects, and tomorrow you got Tinker. What our guys are talking about tomorrow?
I have no clue. Usually find out like moments
find
before.
out.
Apparently, they've even been having like a pre-show meeting that apparently I was never going to. So I'm going to one of those tomorrow morning, and then I'll find out what the topics are. But yeah, check it out on that Darn Kiddas channel, The Thinkers, every Thursday. Great time.
And yeah, tomorrow we do an extra stream on my end to talk about the shows that Dre hasn't seen, so it will only be Cole and I. So yeah, very funny comment there. So I guess we will talk backstage, and everyone in chat, thank you for chatting, and we will talk later, everyone.